Welcome to Unwound. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Pells. Tim has been committed to music education for many decades. He was head of guitar at the Centre for Young Musicians for 38 years, and that's based at Guildhall. Also, for about 20 years, he was head of contemporary strings at the Colchester Institute, and he was the sort of guitar coordinator, guitar organiser for the Inner London Education Authority in the 1980s. Tim has published several books, and as a performer, he is a founding member of the English Guitar Quartet, with whom he still regularly performs, and from whom we'll hear a little bit in the course of the discussion. Our interview will begin by noting an interesting coincidence, which is that we both have harpsichords behind us, perhaps unique in the history of guitar interviews. So I hope you enjoy this episode with a really wonderful musician and person, Tim Pells.
What an attractive instrument you have behind you in the screen there. Oh, how funny. I've got one too. We both have harpsichords here. I studied harpsichord with Jenny Black. She's a wonderful player, of course, like world-class soloist and such on. And me, a complete novice. They let me in. I memorized a grade 5 piece to get in. I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember them finish. I played this. It was a little piece by Purcell. And I played it in my audition, and I thought I killed it. Oh, every note, absolutely right, And I looked around, and Hector Quine was there, and they were all laughing. These Englishmen with their glasses on the ends of their nose. And he looked and said, "You don't play a lot of piano, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't play any. That was it. Don't ask me for anything." But I said, "I really love this music, Purcell." And so they very kindly said, "Okay, as long as I passed my first year exam, they would go with me, and I could have it with a harpsichord teacher, but I had to do piano." So I did piano with Jenny Black, and she taught me so much. And one of the things she taught me was how to practice. Her mantra, which I repeat so often to my own students, is it doesn't matter how fast you go. What matters it's right. And by right, you mean it's in time, in tune if that's an issue. It's got the notes in the right order, but the critical thing is that it's in time. And so you don't practice stopping and starting, you practice playing. And most students, when they practice, stop and start. They do a little bit, absolutely. Oh, yeah, right, oh, I'll try that again. Oh, I'll try that again. And each time they stop, they simply become good at stopping because they're practicing it.
That's right.
And so what Jenny taught me to do was to through practice, like you would through compose. Well, through practice, even if it's moronically, in my case, slow. And so I was doing these little pieces by Couperin and Don Drew and this gorgeous stuff, and I was playing it really slowly, but exactly in time. And that was the quickest and most efficient way but of course it took great determination on my part to keep doing it. But because I was in this unique situation in a foreign country, in this incredible institution, I had the drive to keep doing it and learn that way. But it really affected me and my view about practicing, even with beginners whose parents are only doing it because they want them to just do something.
Okay, well, Tim, thank you very much for joining us on this little program we've got, Unwound. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and perhaps formative musical experiences, inspirations, education?
Sure. Okay, well, it's my pathway hasn't been completely linear in that I've had a couple of starts and stops in different things, but basically I've been a guitar teacher since 1970, and I was very lucky to get going as a youngster teaching because my teacher, I was at the time at high school in Kelowna, British Columbia, which is in the middle of the province, sort of halfway between Vancouver and Calgary. Although I'm actually from Vancouver as such. But my teacher was a very good musician who played the piano accordion. And in fact, my first performing gig ever was as a rhythm guitarist in an accordion band. And despite having played in some fairly aggressive rock bands in my life, that accordion band was as loud as I've ever played. It was just horrendous, the noise that we made, but it taught me to accompany in a diverse circumstance right away. But it was an interesting start because one of the things that I think was a key start for me, that I learned to play plectrum guitar, as it was called at the time. There's quite a strong North American school of, well, actually British as well, of plectrum guitar as being quite a distinct thing, not just any old guitar played with a pick, but playing a melody, usually in the bass, whilst accompanying yourself on the treble. And it was a very, very popular thing in interwar years in the United States and in Britain. And there's quite a lot of recorded material, not recorded material so much, printed material to do with it, because the people that taught plectrum guitar did so from a point of literacy. So it was all to do with reading. Now, if you think into the American thing, which, I was using American material at the time because that's mostly what's available. The Mel Bay modern guitar method starts straight away, and loads of people will go, "Oh, I remember that." But modern guitar method, hardly. But it was a very interesting thing because it was a book that was written down. There was no tab in it, and it was exactly that. It was a tune in the bass and chords in the accompaniment, right from sort of the fifth page. It was quite difficult. So you were reading music in two parts. So I had that in the background, and I really hated the material, I have to say. But I did it because I liked the sound of the guitar. And so I was faced with this conundrum that I loved the sound of the guitar, but I really disliked the material I was learning. And I think that pushed me forward in a lot of ways to try and learn outside of any prescribed path. So I was having lessons weekly with this really wonderful musician in Kelowna, and but at the same time I didn't like what we were doing, and I tried to learn as many diverse things. So the second book I got going with, the actual method of how to play the guitar, was completely contrasted. And to his credit, my teacher gave it to me. It was called The Art of the Folk Blues Guitar, written by Jerry Silverman. And I've still got it. It's my original copy. I've had to buy several because the original one's fallen to bits, but I keep it for sentimental reasons, But what it taught me was to play fingerstyle, because it was all about the music of Reverend Gary Davis, basically. That was the underlying theme. There were a lot of other guitarists' work. Josh White came into it, Bucka White, actually, and some of the other sort of Robert Johnson-derived folk blues guitars. So I developed a real interest in the techniques of how to do it. But, I honestly, crossed my heart, I didn't actually feel really connected with the music. I had no experience of the blues as an art form, aside from what I'd heard in rock and roll. What I was really listening to was Eric Byrne and the Animals. And now there's a blues band from Newcastle, and I still bear the scars. Unfortunately, I've been a lifelong supporter, but I try not to talk about that. And House of the Rising Sun, and Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. Oh, that was massive, because suddenly there was a band who were playing the blues in a different country in their own way, but they also were doing so with this social view. I've got to get out of this place was a great song, and dealing with the decline of the steel industry, the decline of the coal industry, all those things. And I got this kind of connection between music and society, which was special, because I wasn't just thinking in terms of grade 1, 2, 3. I was thinking of this holistic reality that music exists in this place. And there's so much to do. And so that has kind of, I think that's scarred, if you want to call it that, or led in a more optimistic way, me for the rest of my life.
Yes, I think we'll
that sense of...
Yeah, we'll come back to that. I think that's very interesting. Just could we backtrack a little bit? I'm very interested to know in what way the material in those early methods that you walked through was sort of lacking or didn't inspire you. I'm thinking, there's a very... You're talking about plectrum guitar methods. One I'm familiar with is it William Levitt?
Yeah, Bill Levitt. That's you're leaning heavily into the Berkeley jazz area there.
Yes, that's right. But from a purely sort of analytical point of view, I think the method's very good. The steps make a lot of sense, but it's extremely dry.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think
was that the case with the ones you walked through?
Yes, but less so.
Okay.
They were making an attempt to involve culture. You know, the Mel Bay books were using the songs of Stephen Foster, for example. Which years later, when I was teaching at Radley College, we had a visit from a scholar in Southern American gospel music, and he was talking about the songs of Stephen Foster and how really our conception of the popular song, as it is, you know, verse, chorus, bridge, middle eight, you know, all those things, really started with Stephen Foster songs in about 1860, much earlier than we would think in the blues context. But so I think the William Levitt thing I came across in the next step in my education, because I left home and I went to university. And I was determined not to be a music teacher at that stage, even though I had been since 1970. So by 1975, I was really fed up with teaching. I really thought that it was not something I want to do, but I was relatively successful at it in that I was always having people ask me to teach them to play. And so when I went to university in Vancouver, I studied historical geography. And that comes back later on. In the cultural awareness of how music works in a society. Because I'm really interested in that as an academic subject as well as a practical one. And that has affected my writing quite a lot in recent years. But I taught music all the time, and at that stage, that's when I encountered Bill Levitt's stuff, because I started crossing over with Vancouver jazz musicians. And I did so at the Banff School of Fine Arts. I did 2 summers there in the Rocky Mountains, an exceptional place to sit and learn music. And I studied with some exceptional people there, including the wonderful jazz guitarist Gene Bertoncini. I think he's still alive. He must be at least 100. And he was a New York session pro of the ultimate New York session pro skill thing. He'd just do anything, you know. He could literally do 2 jazz gigs a day and then go do a Rodrigo concerto at night. He was a phenomenal guy, and so I got some very special time with him.
But I'm interested in the fact that your entire guitar formation is non-classical. I mean, at this stage,
classical. I had classical guitar as a hobby. When I was at UBC, there was a good music department there, and classical guitar was what they taught, and particularly leaning towards early music. They had a strong early music department. And I started having private lessons, just one-to-one, with one of the graduates of UBC, a chap called Hugh Sandilands, and he was a lutenist, really. Actually, he was also a troubadour. It's very interesting what he did with his lute. And there was a guy at the time called Martin Best, Englishman, who used to tour as a troubadour, and he came to Vancouver, and Hugh got really involved in that and started dressing in funny clothes and playing really outlandish old troubadour songs, you know, in archaic French. It was really interesting. But he was a really good guitar teacher. And so I've just I did my grade 8, you know, I just did it because the Mel Bay had taught me to read. And also, you know, I'd done some classical guitar up to grade 3 with my earliest teacher. And it was just like I approached it like a fingerstyle problem, because I had the Jerry Silverman fingerstyle thing, so I knew how to use my fingers. But so I got my grade 8 classical guitar. I never told the Academy that Royal Conservative of Toronto went to grade 10. They asked me for grade 8 when I applied, and I said, yeah, I got that. Yeah, sure. Nobody ever went any further. But yeah, so in Vancouver, I had classical guitar as a hobby, and then I heard Julian Bream play.
Okay. And when was that, roughly?
77.
77, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've decided pretty quickly that when I got my degree in geography, and I was faced with I got a really good job. I was making some serious money in the Canadian oil industry, and working in crude oil pipelining. But I saved it, and I put the whole thing towards moving to England, starting again in 1978 at the Academy. And once I was in England, and I loved it here straight away, I have to say. I had some connections. I wasn't completely cold. My grandmother's sister was teaching at the Royal Academy as a violin professor during my first 2 years there. And it was she that had encouraged me to come. You know, her classic words were to me when I first met her in 76, and I explained my problem that I love guitar, but I didn't want to be a guitar teacher in Canada. And she said, well, come over here and study then. And if you're any good, you can stay. And if you're not, you can go home. And that was a challenge laid down, you know. So I wasn't completely on my own. But the fact that those I had the range of skills and range of experiences did help me out a lot, because of course when I went to the academy, everybody else had a lot more classical experience than I did. Good heavens, I remember my first day and I had to join the choir, and there were 4 piles of books labeled SATB. I had to stand and watch who picked up which book, I had no idea. I wasn't going to ask. And
of course.
Pretty soon I got it. I thought, well, nobody's a T, and they're all blokes, so I'll go in there. And it took me about 15 seconds to realize I'd made a mistake, and I filtered into the great massive bass players, and they're into sightseeing.
Yeah, well, wonderful.
And that was something I'd never done. That was really instrumental in my own learning, that critical time doing sight singing in the choir.
Really. And the things, you were able to pick it up relatively quickly because of this broad musical formation that you'd had, and learning to read music through the study of plectrum guitar in the early days. Now, what was it about sight singing that helped you?
Power. It was the power to be able to pick up a score and guaranteed to be able to unscramble it.
Yeah.
That was the thing. And also, all the amazing musicians that I met and studied with there, who were all good at those core skills. The sight reading equals sight singing, same skill, And so
That's right.
the very first thing when I finished my time at the academy, and I really loved it there, and so I did 2 extra years because I reckoned I had a lot of catching up to do. My first publication was called Sight Reading for Guitar.
Yeah,
and it did really well, actually. It was published by Usborne. No, not Usborne. What were they called? Actually, I've got it here. Punch Bowl Music. It was one guy. It was a folkie called Doug Kennedy, and he very kindly he worked with me after.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that's the book we published in 1988.
And is it still in print?
No, it's not.
No.
And the reason is Doug went out of business about a year after the publishing that book. And I'd had 2 royalty checks by then. And I was really selling, I sold a couple of thousand copies straight off. And I thought, here we go. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to write. And then, blow me down, he went out of business. So that set it back a little bit.
Okay. Oh, that's a shame. Well, we're going to come to, of course, a more recent book that you.
Passport,
yeah. We'll come to that in a bit. But so that there's no way that anyone could get hold of that book then. I mean, apart from secondhand copies.
You know what? I still use it every day. In fact, one of my students just gave me this one back, and he's very kindly put a plastic cover on it because there aren't many copies left. But I use it, and it's what it is. It's very plain. It just has tunes. Sort of looks like a little bit like a William Levitt's stuff in Berkeley, except it's not so organized in scales and things.
Yeah.
But what it does do is it explores position playing as a way of sight reading. And the sight readings, the books that were available at the time, tended to be very, very complex in their structure. My teacher, Hector Quine, he wrote one in particular with Stephen Dodgson. Yeah. And once you knew how to use it, you could unscramble it, and it was very good. But you would never pick it up as a beginner and learn how to read the guitar like that. And so mine is very much, here's an open string. Here's a tune using that open string. I didn't do repeat this note 4 times type things. I always wanted to play tunes. And that follows through to the later stuff as well in Passport. But there was one thing that did come of that sight reading book, which is interesting, and it was a major children's publisher picked me up on it, and they published this. Learn to Play Guitar by Usborne, and they were good at writing kiddies books, on diverse subjects like shell collecting and the stars and things like that. And they do these wonderful children's books. And they asked me to write a book on guitar. They didn't specify what I had to do, but it was all going to be done in color. So it's very colorful, and they set it very artistically. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try and put it all together. So I straight away, I started with the thing that I loved the most, which was playing chords. And the first chapter is on playing chords. And then there was a chapter on the 3-chord trick. And you can see from the nature of the illustrations, it's very oriented towards children. There's chord diagrams, there's chord charts, there's explanations about chords and how they work. It was... I really like it. My colleague Roland Gallery, who I've worked with so closely over the whole time since I've been in England, he read this and he said he found it a baffling document, and I can understand that because it packs in an awful lot. Not many books at the time, and this is 1988.
Yeah.
Not many books at the time do notation, tablature, chord diagrams, all these diverse learning styles, and then covering funk, jazz, folk blues, electric bass, further ways of using chords, special effects such as wah-wah pedals, and then a whole bunch of tunes using them, So it was a baffling document, and I'm sorry about that for anybody that's got baffled by it, but it was my attempt to try and put this vast culture of the guitar into a place where people could look at it and start it off without having the experience that I'd had with the Mel Bay book of having to hate the stuff that you were learning.
Yeah. No, excellent. And that brings me on to something I wanted to discuss, which is that a lot of guitar methods, a lot of beginner books are very genre orientated. They're sort of limited to one genre, and for people who are going to take the guitar more seriously, most are going to have their fingers in a few different pies, genre-wise, and even though someone may be primarily a classical guitarist, they ought to know how to read from a chord chart. They ought to be familiar with the guitar is such a wide-ranging instrument, and you should have a familiarity with as much of it as possible, I think.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And there's a practicality in that because, if you're going to make your living, if you're going to pay your mortgage on music, you're going to have a regular stream of income. You can't be exclusive. You've got to be inclusive. Yeah, that's right. And those words really resonate with me because when I first finished at the Academy, my first big job was not as a performer, although shortly after that I joined the English Guitar Quartet, and then we really started going for it in performance. But I could do that because I had a part-time job working for the Inner London Education Authority. And that job was as guitar organizer for the authority. And so it gave me authority over schools all the way from Hammersmith to Greenwich and from Hampstead to Croydon. There were 1,400 secondary schools, 250,000 students. And I inherited a team of guitar teachers. There was 130 of them when I started, who were mostly classical guitarists. But they were in these diverse situations in London. It was London, and can you be more diverse than London? Not much. And so we were in these schools, and the ILEA, of course, had a very pronounced political bias, and hence their demise because Margaret Thatcher killed them off with a handbag. And I have to say they provoked her terribly by putting aggressive banners on the hoardings across the river from County Hall, and but nevertheless we had a massively big team of influential guitar teachers. By the time I left, I had 284 guitar teachers on a panel. So I built this, inherited actually. I can't say I built it because my predecessor Elspeth Compton had built a number of guitar teachers of great influence and style and effect as well. And I inherited that. But I was right back to facing one method. And I'm in London and there's all this stuff going on. And I always remember walking into a primary school in Brixton and they were playing some reggae. And it was the reggae boom had just slowed down a little bit, from the late 70s. It was 1984 by then. Yeah. But there was still a lot of music in schools that was reggae based. And I really had no experience of it. And then I thought, well, we can do this on classical guitar. And I was rapidly put up against the obstacle that you couldn't. And the reason was there was no way you could duplicate that subsonic bass. No. You just couldn't do it. As much as you could arrange and you could try to get the groove and the feel, it was the sound, the visceral experience of standing next to those guys when they played those low notes, that became dub and then on to the other styles since. And, that really convinced me I've got to do more than just provide a lesson. I've got to make this relevant. I've got to make it work and include everybody in doing that, because when I go into a school, I have no idea what their the prevailing cultural background is. Some of them prevented music learning, of course, and that was a real problem in itself, because the school was under a brief to have lots of music, and then people in school didn't want it because it wasn't appropriate, and so, there were lots and lots of complex problems to solve, but the energy to do so and the money and the will to aid that was there. And so I went on it, really went for it, and started hiring teachers. I had a whole bunch come down from Newcastle, and whoa, what do you know? I could talk meaningfully about Newcastle because of my old Eric Burdon experience, and there were some great guys, Rod Sinclair teaching. James Sinclair, teaching in Newcastle College, was producing jazz players. God, I've got his name wrong. This old man thing, I'm forgetting names now.
If you think of it later, you let me know and I can.
I'll sort that out. He had a jazz guitar duo, and he produced some really, really great players. And I inherited a whole bunch of them. They came down looking for work in London, and I was able to hand out work. That was my job. So this opened up the ability to work across styles, the ability to work across cultures, and with a range of instruments. And the ILEA was so powerful that if I wanted an instrument that wasn't easily available, like, for example, a good, cheap electric bass. Well, 1982, they hadn't invented Fender Squiers yet, or just started. And there was no such thing. Some of the instruments, people were playing these horrible things coming out of Eastern Europe, and they were all labeled foreign. And, a lot of them, they were so out of tune, and they felt... I put some money together in the ILEA, and we commissioned an English guitar builder to build electric basses. It was Chris May of Overwater Guitars. And we built 400 basses and 400 electric guitars as a junior series, pre-Squier.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And they were proper guitars, they really worked. Unfortunately, a lot of them made their way onto the local markets quite quickly, but, it was, what do you expect? Schools.
Yeah, that's right.
But they were there, and the intention was there to actually make this music sound good. And that became kind of my mantra of inclusivity, that it wasn't enough to provide the opportunity of learning. You had to provide the right learning so that it felt good and sounded good in that culture.
So when you are confronted then with a new student, because you're still very much an active teacher, what is it that you are looking for? What notes what mental notes are you making? How is that going to then determine what material you're going to use? Yeah,
it's a really good question. Really good question. It varies, of course, with the student every time. Yeah, but basically, what I'm doing in the first lesson is planning a pathway. Yeah. And the pathway can be one of many. There are some common points, that there is one thing that guitarists all do. They all strike strings and make a noise, and they all have to press down frets. And they, by and large, if they're going to make music, they generally have to keep in time. Yeah. And, so those things, making a sound and keeping in time, I approach whatever comes. Not many people come with a complete blank sheet.
Exactly.
Almost everybody comes with some prior knowledge, like, my uncle taught me this, or I saw this on YouTube, or whatever. The prior knowledge is there.
Yeah, so and many people say I don't know anything, and then you scratch the surface for 5 minutes, and you find actually they know quite a lot.
And they do. Yeah. I know. Yes. I had a classic case of that this year, where this girl said, "I'm a beginner on electric guitar," and so I set off that, and it turned out she was really a handy chord player. Yeah. And she was she's a Ukrainian girl, and she was in a refugee situation. She came to the school here, and she was really good at chords. It took me 6 months before I found out, because she was very shy. Yeah. And she didn't want to show, and she said, "I'm a beginner." And so we started with beginner electric guitar, page 1. However, there's something in that, though, that the beginner electric guitar, page 1, and the beginner classical guitar, page 1, have similar themes. Yeah. Is that I really like tunes, and tunes have to be rhythmic. I don't like things that are just exercises. For example, people talk about finger strength and things. Oh, look, I've got this machine, and you wiggle your fingers and it builds your strength. Yeah. I couldn't honestly be bothered. It strikes me as such a waste of your life. Whereas, playing on a guitar, your fingers are getting strength, and all the time, if you do it properly, the idea of actually turning everything. So having exercise 1, exercise 2, one of the most critical methods that use the Carlavaro method.
Yes, yeah,
about
yeah.
eight books. Like,
Yeah, that's right,
there's an exercise, and then the next one's one fret up, and the next one's one. Oh
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
no.
It's extremely dry. It's very interesting you should say that
Yeah.
because in the what they call the classical guitar golden age, Saw and Carcasse. I mean, Aguado. All of those methods are music based.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
if you've got slur exercises, for example, they're all ornamented melodies or scales. I
Yeah,
mean, everything is taken back to musicality. You never, and even to the point that Giuliani, with his famous 120 right hand exercises, I mean, you could practice those with open strings, but he doesn't. He gives you a C and a G7 chord. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
Of course, you're going to get repetitive strain injury if you do too much of that. But
Yeah.
but it was
But the point is they
on
sound-
principle, he wasn't going to just write open strings.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They sound beautiful,
Yeah.
and they show those studies. I just thinking the Carcasse Opus 60. They show a real awareness of the musical culture of the time. But of course, there's a massive commercial energy behind that because these guys are quite a few of them refugees at one stage from the Napoleonic Wars, and ending up in London. Going, I feel an empathy with that. I have to say, composing for fashionable salons at the time, making music that people will buy.
Yeah.
And but the idea that those guys, the whole classical guitar crowd, Sor Carcasse, Giuliani, Aguado, and everything, they're very human and making a living, making their way in guitar, and so I've used some of those ideas as well. The fact that what you create really has to sound good.
Yeah,
and there's no point doing anything that doesn't.
Yeah. So how did Passport for Guitar come about? Obviously,
right, yeah.
So
Well, it has its roots in the ILEA.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I thought that may be the case because I can see how what you described would feed into it.
Yeah, definitely. So
I mean, and this is a book. Incidentally, I have taught from this book.
Have you?
Yeah,
cool.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it useful, without any, reference towards how many copies it sells or anything. I've personally have found it very useful to have it because all these things I was writing down beforehand. But also, you see, there's a couple of other themes that emerge from our conversation here, is that every piece in the book has a map to go with it.
That's right.
And then that particular one has the United States highlighted, and it's Hot Delta Blues, which is a theme drawn from the Mississippi Delta. Well, who's the geographer in music then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, can't help myself.
Yeah.
But
I think it's wonderful because it gives especially teaching people either at school or are at school because they're children, and obviously they are learning about cultures in history, to some extent in geography, and they're coming into contact with this in every way. And I think as music teachers, it's part of our job is to help them locate music in these other areas, other disciplines.
Yeah, especially when we've got such a wide availability of information, through the internet that, people can learn so much about music that they might not have experienced. Like my own experience, see, with the blues. I remember my first teacher saying, well, I should go listen to the Siegel Schwall band, Corky Siegel. And I listened to it and I just didn't get it at all. I totally didn't get it. It was really dry, harmonica led, and I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it like I did House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah.
But now I think about that. What a great idea that he should suggest that my listening supported my learning. Now that I've written into Passport, and this is the one area of the book that hasn't really hit public awareness with the book yet. That every one of the pieces in this book is a style of some kind, and they all have accompaniments. And you don't really get the style until you play it with the accompaniment, and you have to do that through a download. And most people don't do the downloads on it, and it's a problem. It's a publisher's problem, really. We should have said it differently so that all of the download keys were on every page, and they didn't. It's at the beginning of the book, and people move so fast. So. That's an error within the book, but the material really works. Like the first piece in Passport to Play, piece 1 is called Reggae Moon.
Yeah.
And it's got the accompaniment has the beat. The tune is just a simple open string B, E, F sharp, E. It's quite haunting because the minor ninth on F sharp. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, it's got harmony in it, but you don't know that until you hear the accompaniment. The accompaniment is going boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, and it's all there. Then you've got the reggae. Incidentally, something that's not printed in the book is the moon idea is a leitmotif for me. Everything I've ever published has had one song called something to do with the moon, and it's always the same tune. And that's because when I was the first lesson I ever picked up a guitar in West Vancouver, the first song I learned was called The Moon. It was something the teacher had written, and it had that minor ninth interval. Maybe that's my whole interest in jazz started at that second. You know, who knows how far we carry that first experience with us.
I think
But that's where, you know, Passport is aiming to do. It's aiming to be experiential, historical, cultural, geographical, and to engage the guitar in all of those worlds, because heaven knows it does, doesn't it? I mean, our instrument is so rich, and even within one style, you know, even within, say, talk about classical guitar, you know, you think of the countries and the musics and the cultures and the sheer thrill of international activity that's in that world, and that's just classical guitar, and without even talking about blues, jazz, folk. And one thing that happened to me that was really great fortune is when the ILEA did break up in 1990, or got broken up anyway, the only bit of it that survived was the Junior Music College and the Centre for Young Musicians, which is now owned and operated by the Guildhall. Because the City of London took over as the Guildhall after the ILEA, and they've been instrumental in keeping that Centre for Young Musicians going. That's the inner London, the London Schools Symphony Orchestra is based there. So I was head of guitar there for 37 years, right from the ILEA days right through until last year when I retired, and but that gave me the opportunity to build a small team of teachers, between 5 and 8, depending on what year it was, doing a range of things. And again, it was classical guitar to start, and then on a small but very carefully cultivated group of teachers, you know, we were able to introduce other teaching traditions within the context of a junior music college that had to relate to Guildhall, had to be, you know, very exam driven and result driven, and plus we were getting kids with drive and culture and who wanted to learn music. Nobody comes to CYM and doesn't want to learn music, but you know, there's 500 of them on a Saturday. It's a happy chaos, very Londonish, and kids from all over the place. But the one driving thing is they all want to be there, and that's a big deal. What a luxury! It was wonderful. Those were great teaching years, and that was very formative in my views about how music education should go.
Yeah. Slightly unrelated thing, but I think it's useful for people who are watching this who are maybe teaching guitar themselves. Music notation. It's become a slightly controversial topic in recent years. Where are you on that?
Our system of notation is absolutely amazing. You know, the fact, without our system of notation, Beethoven 6 I mentioned before, we wouldn't know how it went.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have existed, in fact, because, you know, symphonic music of that scale can't exist without writing it down, especially when there's no recording available at the time. And so I think it's a wonderful system, unequaled in its longevity and its ability to deliver this abstract concept, the fact that music can't be seen, that we can only feel it. You know, that how abstract can we get to go from the ink to sound? It's a weird and wonderful abstraction, and I respect it enormously, use it daily, and think that it's the best system. However, the way it's taught isn't. And that, I feel that there have been, over the centuries that we've had our system of notation, I say roughly 5 centuries, fine-tuned by JSB in around 1718, you know, even making a joke about it at the time, you know, with the well-tempered clavier. Come on, that's a German joke, right? And but that system of 12 notes and the keys that we have in the way, it's so limitless in its capability, and people are constantly pushing the limits, of course, you know, sort of George Harrison style, I need more notes than that, but it works amazingly well. But the idea that over those hundreds of years that we've had it, and there have emerged these orthodoxies of you must have to do this before you do that. Well, in our instrument, it's not necessarily true, because, if you're playing, say, C major, it's not the easiest key in the world because it's subdominant chord. Oh, it has a bar on the first position. Oh no, and the compromises that have been made to the system of theory driving what music you can play and what music you can't, I find divisive.
Yeah.
And so I use notation wholeheartedly. I try and teach it in a way that the musical meaning of what it's trying to say comes out. That it's not a gospel text in that sense, and that there's lots of people who make great music in the world who don't use it, and we've got to acknowledge that. You can't ignore Hendrix.
Yeah.
I mean, good heavens.
Yeah.
And, oh, Jimmy, here's a song I wrote called Purple Haze. Here's the notes for it. Yeah. Right. It doesn't fit, But, the great music making is musical. It's not necessarily reading, but as a system of communicating musical ideas, it's unequaled.
Yes. Yeah.
So I feel no hesitation about enthusiastically grappling with that, with the reservation that I don't diminish other people's work if they're not doing that, and I try and work with people on their own grounds.
Yeah. I agree. I agree completely.
Going back to the first lesson idea, and I said that I want something that sounds good.
Yeah.
And that probably has a tune and it probably has rhythm. Actually, you could work it the other way around. You can do that first. Now, going back to Reggae Moon, if somebody struggles with reading the notation, then let's do the bass line, and we can play it. It's elephants and donkeys. Great. It's EAD. That's all you need. And here's your groove. Put your thumb on the thickest string near you. And not dealing with up and down, because up and down is bad because it sounds low, but it's highest away from the floor. That's real.
Yeah, absolutely.
How many times do you get that problem? Or the same up and down the neck.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you go down one fret? That's not what I meant. So, you're on your Reggae Moon and you want to have fun playing it. You want somebody to experience the feeling of playing it. So, onto the bass line. Boom, 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 boom. Can they keep time with that? Doom. And then I'm on top going chop, chop, chop. And you can feel it. You can feel it start to happen, And okay, and it's a short step from there to this is the symbol that represents that. And here we get the classic, the sounding symbol. That's what it is. Symbol and we're straight on to Mrs. Kerwin, for heaven's sakes. Going back in education terms, teach the thing before the symbol.
Yeah.
And why make a symbol for it if you can't do it? Well, that I apply that in guitar teaching all the time. We do it first, then I show you what it looks like if it's written out, and you can remember it. If you know what the reading means, then you can use that as a way of memorizing it. But you don't have to read it actively as you're playing it.
Yeah. It's great.
But one of the key things is just doing it. And I always have this thing. I sort of feel I should have this on carved above my teaching room door. It's "Shut up and play your guitar." It's Frank Zappa.
Yeah, that's right. Frank Zappa.
It was his last solo album, And what a great phrase to have that. And I really think sometimes there's a lot of that we just need. Shut up and play the guitar. However you can.
Yeah, of course. On that, how many times you must come across this all the time? Pushy parents and things. When are they going to do grade 1? When are they going to do grade 2? But they actually don't practice. And my theory is that a lot of parents think of music lessons as just being another weekly activity. It's a bit like going to karate once a week or going to swimming class once a week, and they don't appreciate from the outset that actually it will require a daily commitment. I mean, it might just be 5 minutes a day in the initial stages, but it needs that. And I always think there's a slight problem, and maybe this takes us back to the first lesson thing, trying to come up with a pathway for each student. Expectation management.
Yeah.
What are you going to get out of me as your teacher, and what do you need to get out of yourself as well? I think they tend to think they'll get it all from us.
Yes, absolutely. You very rarely, but occasionally, get that saying, "Well, I don't know. You tell me what to do, and I'll do it." That sort of thing, and it's a real obstacle that when it happens. I think You see, I do feel that the actual experience of making music has to be the answer to that, because if they feel how it goes when they leave the lesson, if they know, it's not just a question of working out the notes, put your finger here, put your finger there, kind of thing. But if you can actually feel, oh yeah, right, okay, I know this tune. It's funny teaching music, finger picking sort of country style is quite interesting, because you can do quite banal tunes, and make them sound quite good using a sort of Merle Travis thing, with the damped out thumb, ka-doom, doom, 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 3, 2, blind, boom, mice, that sort of thing, I demonstrated that live at rugby school for Graham Roberts when he was head of guitar there. There's a video on my YouTube site. It's that workshop demonstrating it. But if it's the feeling of how it goes, and if you have somebody taking that something out of the lesson, can walk out of that lesson carrying it with them, then I think we're on the right track. And even like you say, 5 minutes. Funny enough, my wife Mary is doing a PhD in that very subject at the moment. She's doing it at Birmingham. And she's studying the causality of practice, how it actually happens, and what people do with it. And it's a very interesting topic, and very relevant to our teaching practices, because there's no perfect answer to it. But my universal answer to it is this experiential one.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. I know we haven't discussed the English Guitar Quartet much, but it would be really good if I could play an excerpt of an English Guitar Quartet recording.
Sure. Okay, well, we did 5 CDs. The 3 that we did with Sadisc, the Romantic Guitar, Baroque Guitar, and Spanish Guitar quartets.
Yeah.
But of those, I mean, there's things to commend in each of them. I think probably the most radical one is the Romantic Guitar Quartets. We're using extended instruments, because I'm an octave down, and Roland's a fourth up. And the Chopin mazurkas that we did are much unknown and very special, I think.
Well, Tim, thanks very much for coming on. It's been a joy to speak to you. We could speak all day, I think. And I mean, so many words of wisdom from a wealth of experience, of knowledge, of expertise. I think anyone watching this who is involved in music education, certainly teaching guitar, will have a lot to take away from it. So thank you so much.
Well, I hope so. And thanks for the opportunity. It's really exciting for me to just be able to talk about it.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. All the best.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, bye-bye.